Welcome back to Early Birds. For episode 2, we are visiting the beautiful city of London. Today, our guest, Tim from Parity. Let's get a quick introduction. Obviously, you know Tim, working at Parity. So I was thinking maybe you give a short introduction of who you are so that people know at home.
Yeah, so who I am as a person. I like to sort of go out, enjoy myself, socialize with friends, and sort of provoke, interesting arguments and stuff. Play a little bit of devil's advocate, wind people up a little bit. So people might know me from Parity. I'm the blockchain financial controller there. I've been there about a year and a half now, but it's been a really fun ride, full of sort of really intelligent people that are happy to help, people that love having fun. And yeah, it's been a really fun time at Parity.
I mean, especially how you and Casper met, right?
So Casper was obviously the CFO of the Web3 Foundation. Working in the finance team at Parity, we sort of had a few interactions, not necessarily direct interactions. And when we were sort of talking to a few people in the ecosystem about launching our own project, they sort of said, have you spoke to Polymech? And we were like, we haven't yet. It's on our radar, but it's a great idea. So that initiated us to sort of reaching out to Casper. And Casper's been great, sort of jumping on calls with us, explaining to us sort of the details and the questions that we have around the white paper and the mechanism of how Polymech helps with the pre-sale and the liquidity post-launch and all that sort of stuff. And then, just sort of we jump in a Telegram group and keep the dialogue open, right?
It's funny because usually if you talk about, accounting and if you go blockchain accounting but you have a background of, challenging a lot of stuff and being the devil's advocate, how did you get into accounting? Because for me, accounting personally is very boring. I understand blockchain accounting is a very different story.
Yeah, so I guess the thing is a lot of people see accounting as just numbers, right? And you tell someone you're an accountant and they're like, oh, so you must be good at maths, right? And I guess there is a little bit of numbers involved. I guess it's more pattern recognition, but I think the main basis of accounting is sort of being able to build a strong argument for or against sort of what you want to do or the accounting policies you want to employ or apply, and being able to justify that because everything's quite subjective, right? I guess it's quite similar to sort of the legal world. And you need to take the standards that are already out there and especially with blockchain and Web3 crypto stuff. There's no sort of set accounting standards that govern because it's such an innovative sort of tech. There's no sort of set accounting standards. So it's sort of not playing around with it, but
let's hope not.
Not playing around with it, but just sort of like really sort of like reading deep into it and thinking of stuff that could apply, right? And sort of drawing the nearest parallels to existing accounting standards. So for instance, maybe some aspects that is quite similar to sort of shares and stocks, and in some aspects it's more similar to sort of an intangible asset. And then just sort of, I guess, paving that way for the future of any Web3 blockchain businesses.
This is the most exciting description of accounting I've ever heard.
I can make anything sound interesting if I try hard enough.
That's a good skill. Especially because I assume, accounting and how you describe it, you get a big overview of everything that's happening in the organization.
Yeah.
And so from the strategic perspective, obviously also very interesting to see where this goes. But then, okay, so you started with accounting. Why then did you enter Web3?
Why did I enter Web3? So I guess towards the end of 2019, I was incapacitated for a little bit after I had an operation. And so I decided that I wanted to spend that time, I had about a month off work, and I wanted to spend that time learning something new. And I started off sort of, obviously with the intention of making a little bit of money on the side. I was looking a little bit at FX trading and sort of trying to understand the mechanisms of that, candlestick charts, all that sort of stuff. And then from that sort of stumbled into the crypto world because around about that time, everything was exploding, right? Mm-hmm. So then just got pretty weirdly obsessive about it, as I do sometimes, and just spent sort of all my free time like reading up on liquidity pools or new projects and layer ones and layer twos and different blockchains and how they interact. And what really intrigued me about Web3 was sort of bringing the power back to the people and taking it away from centralized institutions that throughout history have sort of manipulated, global banking systems and been responsible for huge financial crashes that have like ruined people's lives and stuff like that. I'm very much a power to the people kind of person. So that's what really intrigued me about that. And then I went to work for a company that does biometric sort of identity verification. So they utilize AI to verify people's identities. And these are the sort of products that companies like Binance and Crypto.com and eToro would all use to be able to onboard people faster. So I guess they couldn't change their mind about investing in crypto before they got KYC. So I went into that world because I read a book called Identity is the New Money. And again, that just sort of screamed out and it drew parallels between these sort of, I guess, decentralized identities and, you know, the financial system and the monetary world, and sort of being able to, you know, for instance, when you go to a bar or something like that, right, and they ask you how old you are and you give them your ID, you're giving them all this information that they don't need. They've got your address and they've got your full name and they've got when you pass your driving test. But ultimately, all they should need to know is the fact that you're 18, right? And this is before I'd heard of, like, I guess it's before Kill even existed, right?
I was about to mention, yeah.
So this was all off chain. Like, this wasn't utilizing blockchain tech. This is just mainly sort of utilizing AI to speed up the KYC process, but this is all off chain. It's completely Web2 business. And then it's interesting when Kilt came about, it really intrigued me because I was like, this is exactly what my company should be looking at for the future. This is the future of identity and KYC and being able to prove who you are without, you know, submitting details to Binance and submitting details to eToro and submitting them to Zipcar and anything that, you know, needs to prove who you are. You give them reams and reams of information that's then subject to data leaks and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I guess that was sort of my entry into Web3 and what interested me about Web3. And then Parity came knocking, looking for a new member of the finance team. And obviously I leapt at the opportunity and, you know, never looked back. You know, Parity know how to work hard and play hard, and it really encourages a positive culture. Everyone gets along really well. My first day was on a company retreat in Tenerife.
It's not a bad way to start.
It's not a bad way to start. It's not a bad way to start. I've definitely had worse Mondays, you know.
Or worse retreats. No comment.
Yeah.
But you mentioned it before, right? So starting your own new adventure.
Right.
I assume, you know, spending a lot of time and on learning new things and seeing what the ecosystem has to offer. And also with your position, obviously, seeing a lot of the insights of, you know, there's a lot of great ideas, but they also need to work, right?
Right.
So in the end, it's all also a business, right? Even if it's a Web3 startup.
Right.
So then I assume, when did you think, okay, now I want to make this jump of, hey, it's nice to be active and to be part of the community, but I want to contribute more.
Right. So I guess there's always this sort of like old adage, right, that you're never going to achieve financial freedom working a 9 to 5. And so whilst I had great fun and learned a lot of experiences, I've always had, I guess, a little bit of an entrepreneurial mind and tried many sort of failed businesses from sort of the age of 16, just, you know, giving it a go, trying to sort of, I guess, apply the stuff that I've learned from like business, economics, maths and accounting to sort of try and find sort of gaps in markets and stuff. Obviously, being a non-technical founder myself, the chances of me building something super technical that's, you know, got loads of really complex mechanisms, stuff like that, was probably quite low.
I can relate.
Yeah. So, but Tom, again, so Tom, the founder, my co-founder is super entrepreneurial as well, and just really good at talking to people, you know, and you can, you know, explain what your business is and where the struggles are to Tom, and he'll just sort of come up with 10 different ways about how you can make it better. And it's just so quick with that sort of stuff. So he was working on this project for a few years. So he came from construction background. He was a quantity surveyor before moving into the world of Web3, then doing special projects at Parity. He had exposure to all sorts of things and started working on this project, Archisinal. And then sort of I was helping him ad hoc, I guess, along the way, just because we work quite closely together at Parity. We're good friends. We spend a lot of time together outside of work and enjoy each other's company, you know. So I was helping him a little bit with that. And then he asked me to sort of get on board properly as a co-founder. So I was like, of course, you know.
Instantly,
didn't even have to think about it. I was like, of course.
Nice.
But we complement each other very well, you know. If I'm being honest, Tom's probably the best person for this podcast. He's just great at speaking. He's got a lot of charm and charisma, and, you know, no one can have a conversation with Tom and not like Tom, right? And then I bring, I guess, he's a dreamer, like all good entrepreneurs are, and I sort of have to bring him back down to reality sometimes with about how we're actually going to do this in practice, right? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And so we complement each other really well in that respect. And we have great fun working together, you know, so it's been a great journey.
It's a good mix, the visionary and the business person, right? So would you call it like this, right? Okay, so yeah, you obviously both met at Parity, both working there together. And okay, now I also understand a bit more the story of Tom having a background in construction. But so what was his background, and how do you tackle an industry which is so hugely established everywhere, and, you know, difficult to change things, and people like what they know, and, you know, how do you take this decision of like, hey, you know, we are the people, we want to change this?
So I guess it's, I mean, first of all, spotting the opportunity in the AEC industry, so architecture, engineering, and construction. It's a massive industry globally, obviously, but always just been so slow and so paper heavy and had so many problems. And I can draw a lot of parallels to potentially, like the supply chain logistics industry, where, again, it's quite an old industry, quite dated and, huge, but has started to really benefit from blockchain tech in terms of tracking things across the supply chain on the blockchain. So we saw an opportunity, and yes, of course, it's going to be a challenge to change people's perceptions. But the main way we're going to go around that is, I guess, first of all, targeting young professionals, people quite early on in their careers, people in university, coming out of university, architecture firms that are trying to utilize AI and existing tech already, and trying to be quite innovative in the space. That's going to be how we sort of penetrate the market, because they're going to be more open to new technological ideas and ways to improve, rather than being stuck in their ways because they've done it for the last 30, 40 years, right? That's sort of how we're going to try and penetrate the market, and change people's perceptions is important. But I think that for me personally, the key to do that is in a sort of Web 2.5 way. So for people to be utilizing blockchain and utilizing Web3 and be immersed in it without necessarily realizing they're so immersed in it. And I think the key to that is just a super clean UI without all the confusing jargon. So, you can click certain buttons that they're used to, and it will have impacts in the back end that trigger sort of mechanisms on the blockchain, just so people don't necessarily I think a lot of people will look at it or look at certain Web3 applications and be like, oh, no, don't understand that. Connect my wallet. Like, how do I do that? And why am I signing this transaction? I can't read the code and all this sort of stuff, right?
So to take one step back, right? For me personally also, there's always the two main questions, right? It's why should people care, right? So what's the issue that you see that, you can improve? And also, are people, looking for this, right? Because there's two ways to build. It's you build a product and then you try to find people who want the product,
right?
Or you ask the people what they want and then you deliver the product. So what's the approach that you believe? Is it either or is it a mix?
So I guess initially the main challenge that we want to address in the construction industry is that there's a significant amount of firms that are struggling to find qualified architects and attract that talent. But there's also a significant amount of architects that are actually currently unemployed, right? And so there's a disconnect. And this disconnect could be a geographical disconnect or talent in areas that are maybe less economically developed, struggling to market themselves in a way that reaches out to the firms that might want to employ them, right? So initially it's going to be a catalyst for connecting these people. So for architects and designers to be able to showcase their designs and market themselves on our platform. And then for the practices to be able to find these professionals and be like, wow, there's some real untapped talent here. And potentially, initially it might just be conceptual designs, very conceptual, futuristic, I guess, architecture designs, but there's that sort of inherent to, there's a talent behind this, right? And it will just be able to sort of open a dialogue between the professionals and the practices as a result of them locating each other on this platform.
And I assume the part where you go into, Web 2.5 or Web 3 is ownership, right? Or where do you see this connection of, because you're describing like a platform, right?
Right.
When did you take the decision that we need to have this on chain?
Right. So ultimately the initial idea and the long-term vision when we first ideated this was to be able to have all the dispute resolution and arbitration on chain. There's a lot of issues in the construction industry, right? So there's an example of, a tragedy that happened in London a few years ago where Grenfell Tower caught alight and, many people lost their lives. When the inquest came, the laptop that had all the information mysteriously went missing, right? And this is what got Tom thinking, how can we solve this with blockchain technology? And if all of that arbitration and discussion and documentation was on chain, even if it was on a sort of a private blockchain, that wouldn't have been able to go missing. So someone would have got held responsible for that tragedy that happened. So that was why we went down the blockchain route initially. Now, we've been in conversations with the Construction Blockchain Consortium and the technical faculty at UCL, which is University College London. And we've had some quite in-depth conversations with them about, IP and smart legal contracts and how we can sort of start to incorporate this on chain. And we understand from those conversations that actually the regulatory landscape is a little bit further behind in terms of adopting, smart legal contracts and stuff like that to be able to sort of prove ownership and all this sort of stuff, because I guess sort of owning an NFT is, yes, you own that NFT, but is there any IP attached to that, right? So that's sort of a little bit further down the line. That's why we initially went down this route. But ultimately, those conversations were really helpful, and it's still on our roadmap, and it's still something we want to work closely with these technical people that are already undertaking research into this to resolve. But initially now, it's going to be more about talent retention and acquisition for architecture firms, right? So there is a global disconnect between the talent and the practices that might want to employ them. And having this global sort of peer-to-peer marketplace and sort of, I guess, catalog brochure of your work is enabling architects to be able to market themselves. And then further down the line, then if we can prove concept and institutions and architecture practices that are open to innovation want to start using the platform, they can create sort of a homepage to which hosts all their employees, architects, which has sort of essentially sort of a catalog of their work, right? Then
it's
when
like an archive, basically, right?
Sort of like an archive, right?
So even if you have the example of, the tower that burned down, you have an archive, you have blueprints. So if you think about the big vision, right? Because obviously everyone has a big vision, and good entrepreneurs, they understand you need to do it step by step.
Yeah.
But what's for you the big vision? The
big vision is something we call decon or deconstruction. It's just a term that I guess we've had a little bit of fun. A little bit. Yeah, it's not a bad term. But essentially sort of resolving all the challenges that the industry is facing via blockchain technology. And, the initial one, as you say, is connecting talent, right? The second one is being able to empower architects and making sure that they're sort of fairly compensated for the work that they're putting out there, right? Further on, it's having all the dispute resolution, arbitration online, and whether that's through, people having certain digital credentials, right, through something like Kilt, which would say they have X amount of experience in the industry, or they have these qualifications that make them a fair adjudicator or a knowledgeable adjudicator in these disputes, and being able to use sort of like a community aspect of dispute resolution. But ultimately, there's so much late payment of invoices. The construction industry is so slow because once one step happens, you have to wait for, I guess, the funding, because it's all about cash flow, right? And then before you can start the next stage and the next stage. But if all this is through smart contracts and the funding goes through immediately, and there's sort of all the evidence is on chain, it just streamlines the process so much, and it takes away all this paper heavy aspect of the industry. So yeah.
I mean, I'm fairly unexperienced in this industry. One of the things that I assume is the personal relationships in this industry are very important, I guess. Yeah, if you have large deals, you build relationships over years. And this is also, I think, what you mentioned in the beginning, that you have those pillars of the industry that have been around for many, many years, and, that also dominate this industry. Are you looking to wait it out until they leave, or do you think you can replace it, or are you focusing much more on, serving the rest of the market?
I think ultimately, if we can just tap into 1% of global architects, it becomes a very sustainable business model, and that's just via royalties, right? So that's just with the MVP product offering. Once we can start to sort of sell this solution as a subscription as a service to architecture practices, then it will create an avenue for annual recurring revenue for the business, and sort of be quite groundbreaking in terms of bringing a real world use case to Web3, because I don't know, and I could be wrong, I don't know how many Web3 projects there are out there that sort of incorporate a slightly Web2 element of being able to license this out as a plug and play solution or a white label solution or whatever you want to call it to existing industries, right?
It's a fair point. I mean, you mentioned it before, obviously, with Kilt. And also, we have a partnership with Kilt and also with Deloitte for the KYC DIDs, right? The decentralized identifiers and credentials. And that's exactly what my thought was when we were able to launch it, because in my opinion, it was one of the few actual use cases where you solve a Web 2 problem with a Web 3 solution. Right. One question is, and we talked about it, is Web 2 ready for Web 3? I also believe sometimes it's important to ask, is Web 3 ready for, architecture or also construction, right? I mean, this is something where you can bridge this, because obviously a lot of people, they will be like, yeah, sounds interesting, but I don't know shit about that, right? So
Right.
pardon my English.
No, I completely agree. I think that the interesting thing is, obviously Web3 is a very new industry in the grand scheme of things, right? And you've got so many visionaries, so many very, very technical people that are building these products that this tech that people can't even conceptualize, can't even visualize in their mind, right? Unless they're so deeply immersed in Web3 and almost like forging new markets, right? Like with DeFi and stuff like that. It's like, okay, but this is for people that are already into Web3. Mm-hmm. And, you probably less than 1% of the population worldwide is already into Web3, right? And so you're like very limited in the target market. You're forging a new market, right? What we think is important to encourage further adoption and, bring more people onto Polkadot, bring more people onto A-Star or just Web3 ecosystem as a whole is identifying issues that are currently being faced in the world that most of the people outside of our bubble are immersed in, and show them how this technology can actually make their life better and make their life easier and improve and streamline processes and empower people as well, right?
Mm-hmm. But so I'm a marketing person, right? And you have an accounting background. So I would argue it's quite, we cover a big chunk of the spectrum. And if you think about what's the storyline, right? Because I'm always thinking about storylines because that's how people understand things. People don't read, let's be honest. They don't read. That's why we do a podcast, right? They don't read and they don't want to take too much time to learn about things.
Right.
What's like this short storyline of, how do you envision the future of architecture? And if you combine Archisinal, right? So with Web3, what's this storyline that you're looking at?
For me, it's interesting, right? So right now, if you want to onboard yourself onto Web3, with most products and most offerings out there, you have to take some sort of financial risk, right? You need to invest a certain amount of money, whether it's, less than £100 or a few £100 or a few thousand, whatever it might be. There's a financial risk involved to be able to potentially benefit. And with most people being very risk averse, it's so hard to persuade people to onboard them into Web3 because they're going to have to go through some financial risk, right? And we're in a global recession right now. Like this is probably one of the worst. We're probably in the midst of one of the worst global recessions that I've seen in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. And add that to, the imbalance in the political landscape right now. It's quite a scary time for people, and it's quite hard for people to part ways with their hard-earned money, right? Now, with the Archisinal MVP offering, so the initial product offering that will be launching in Q1 next year, you will have the ability as a creator, as a designer, to benefit from your work through blockchain without necessarily risking anything financially yourself, right? Because potentially people that are already in the Web3 world could see your work, see your concepts and want to support you by staking their tokens against you so that you can passively earn tokens and potentially use that as a way to focus more on your craft, right? Rather than focusing on things that take you away from essentially your art as an architect, as a designer. We believe that architects are artists, right? And it should be, I guess, treated as such and remunerated as such. And it's such a difficult thing because everyone needs art. If I go slightly astray from architecture, everyone needs art, right? Everyone enjoys art, but artists notoriously, unless they're, hugely famous or dead, their work isn't actually worth a lot, and it's very hard for them to make ends meet and stuff like that. And so it takes them away from their craft, and so it actually takes something away from the world in that way, I believe. So if we can empower creators to focus more on their craft via earning tokens passively and garner support from a global community, I think it's going to be truly beneficial to sort of the world as a whole, right?
I like the answer. Yeah, because it's all about the storyline, right?
Right.
Because there's so many things going on in this world. Nobody has time to keep up with everything, but everyone has time to remember a nice story, right? And so we're talking about art, and you meant Archisinal. How, I need to ask. So I've had many people that came up to me that told me I need to ask. So how did you come up with the name? And is Archisinal the correct pronunciation?
Archisinal is the correct pronunciation.
Nice.
So you nailed it. Nice. Not everyone
First
nails
try.
it. We are very much stressing the phonetic way of sort of spelling it on sort of publications we're putting out. So on the white paper and on our pitch deck, we are trying to make sure people say it right. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily matter, in my opinion, if people say it right. I don't know, for instance, if it's Aave or Aave, the DeFi protocol.
It's art, right? It's subjective.
Yeah, so it doesn't really matter as long, if people start debating about how to say it, then, any publicity is good publicity, right?
I agree.
In terms of the name, I've got to give credit to Tom for that. Whether that's a positive thing or not is for everyone else to decide. But he sees you've got architecture and you've got artisan or artisanal. And so he's sort of combining these two things, right? So combining sort of the art and the architecture in this word.
Okay, that does make sense. I like the idea. That's really fun. I think putting together this bridge between Web 2 and Web 3 is quite an ambitious adventure that you're going on.
Right.
So maybe talk about a bit, okay, what's the stage that you believe like you are in? And what are the things that you want to happen very quickly in the next, I would say, like 6 months?
So we are in the final stages of the MVP development, right? So that should be ready within the next few weeks and to launch on A-Star testnet in January 2021. Within the next few weeks, we really want to try and rally both the Web3 community and the young architecture, student architecture community. It's important for us to really have the A-Star community behind us because they have a mechanism called DApp staking. And DApp staking is going to be quite important for us to be able to meet our working capital requirements in the absence of any funding leading up to, for instance, potentially a launch on Polymech, but also to fund the development of the next stages because we want to continue to add features, right, and continue to solve problems that the AEC industry is facing. So initially, obviously, the Web3 A-Star community, Polkadot community is very important to us. Mm-hmm. But we also want to make sure we're not alienating anyone, right? So we want to be able to sort of rally that community and build that community without alienating people that aren't in Web3, young architects that aren't in Web3. And so it's going to be, we need to be quite careful with our messaging, right, and our branding. So we're actually flying out to Argentina at the end of December, and we're going to spend a few weeks there, maybe a month or so there, and try and really capitalize on the success that the Polkadot Blockchain Academy had in Buenos Aires. There's, quite a vibrant Polkadot community out there already, so we want to leverage that. Again, I think it's the perfect timing for it. But we also want to visit some universities out there, right? Because I think global outreach is important, especially in the world of Web3. We're talking about connecting people globally, collecting talent globally. So it's important for us to sort of slowly make our way through different places that might be sort of either Polkadot hubs essentially, right, or have an existing Web3 community and educate them on the product and educate them on what we offer and what benefit it will have to not just the architecture industry, but looking forward, any creative industry. This concept could be applied to other verticals as well, right? So I think that's our main priority.
I totally agree. South America is very, very strong in Polkadot. We have a lot of ambassadors from South America. So shout out to them. So yeah, let us know when you go there. I'm sure they'll be happy to meet up.
100%.
There's a lot of really cool people out there. Not only there. I mean, you mentioned the A-Star, right? So I would also assume maybe Japan being like obviously a very big and important market for you.
Yeah.
Also design perspective, right? So architecture, obviously. How do you manage this challenge of this global reach, right? Because we see it from our perspective, so difficult to reach a lot of people in different countries with different cultures, different languages, and to bring them together.
I think building a human connection is always important, right? It's much more memorable, it's much more personal if you actually meet people in person and take the time to sit with them and explain to them the product. So for instance, going to universities and saying, here's £10, come and have a chat with me for 10 minutes about architecture on Web3. And just get people thinking about it, get some, decent clips and like potentially even have sort of workshops with them and just really, I guess, experiment and just see what we can do and be quite innovative with the sort of maybe community meetups or speaking at different events, getting word out there on podcasts, Discord, Telegram channels, Twitter, and just really focusing quite heavily on marketing, I guess, leading up to crunch time, right?
Yeah, I mean, congrats for taking this step.
Thank you very much.
It's very courageous.
It's exciting.
I think I always admire people who do things, right? Because a lot of people, they complain, they talk about doing something in the future, but sometimes you just need to do something, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to get your last take on, maybe your perspective of now entering a new part of the Polkadot ecosystem, right? So from Parity to now being a startup in Polkadot. And then I'll give you a little session to plug what's coming next.
Cool. No, I think, to be honest, it's the timing is so perfect. And sometimes life just works out like that, right? But nearing the launch of the product, Parity has decided to decentralize, right? Not everyone, but they're investing heavily in the people. They're investing heavily in making sure that people are set up to go out into the ecosystem and build their own projects and contribute to the Polkadot ecosystem without this centralized entity, Parity, this giant sort of being behind them. Parity is almost primed people via education and real world experience to go out into the ecosystem and really contribute. And it encourages competition as well, right? I think you'll see so much more success in the Polkadot ecosystem in the next few years than you did potentially in the last year or so, just via this. It encourages healthy competition. But Parity have been so supportive. Shout out to everyone at Parity that's really got behind us and supported us, whether it's through bouncing ideas off them or empowering us to sort of go off and do podcasts like this and allowing us to really sort of market ourselves to people within Parity and be proud of what we're doing rather than trying to hide in the shadows of what we're doing. So, the support from Parity has been incredible. And having me and Tom have both worked there for sort of between the past 18 months and 2 years and made some great connections. And without it, potentially wouldn't be on this podcast and wouldn't have met a lot of the team that we've got helping us out on it. And, we're all obviously working for free right now on Archisinal. Everyone that's working on Archisinal is doing it for the love of it and because they believe in the project, right? And so I just want to, take the moment to thank everyone that's helped us in any capacity to sort of get to where we are today and anyone that will help us going forward.
Yeah, that's how life works, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of different paths. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah.
I like to end on this note because you started off by saying you're the devil's advocate. But I don't see it that way. I think you're very inspiring. It's very nice to hear this vision and to see the excitement as well.
Right.
So now's your time to shine. We have this time 3 cameras, one here, one here, one here. I want to give you a short spot here where you can plug whatever's going on in your life. Tell the people what's coming next. What should they look out for?
Cool. So obviously, we're going to start off in Argentina, but the world is our oyster. If there's anywhere that you think you want to see us pop up, you want to talk to us, you let us know. Drop a comment in the comment section, and we'll do our best to get out there to you. If you've got any suggestions, thoughts, criticism, feedback, we'd love to hear it. We recently posted on the Polkadot forum with our idea, and we're applying for the Decentralized Futures program that Parity is very kindly offering with the help of the Web3 Foundation. So please check it out. The link will be in the bio. Our white paper and our light paper is live on our website now. And yeah, we can't wait to sort of meet all of you, I guess, and start talking to you. We're going to open up some communication channels so you can reach out to us directly. So stay tuned for that, and it will probably be in the caption of this video.
Very, very, very nice. Well, Tim, absolute legend. It was a pleasure talking to you. And so this was the second episode of Early Birds here in the beautiful city of London. So let's see where it takes us next time. And let's wrap it up.